Hi, my name is Gering. I'm working for Fraunhofer IPK, and within the BatteryPass project I'm responsible for the identification of technical standards. Thanks. Or not? Not really. Now it is. Okay, so quite similar to what you just heard about the JTC 24, our goal was to identify technical standards which could be solutions to implement such a DPP system. And since we started in April 2022 with our project, information on a DPP was quite rare and changing a lot. So the battery regulation was still in the proposal phase, as was the ESPR. There was no standardization request out yet. And so we needed to come up with our own ideas how that system could look like and what kind of standards could be used to implement it. And let me just start with a definition of interoperability. We heard it a lot today. We, within our project, used the definition of the Enterprise Interoperability Framework, which defines interoperability as the ability of organizations to interact towards mutually beneficial goals involving the sharing of information and knowledge between these organizations through the business processes they support by means of the exchange of data between their ICT systems. So why am I telling this? Interoperability is actually a capability on several levels. So we can't only look into data, into semantics or interfaces. It's actually quite a little more. And what we derived from that was what we call the technical standard stack. It's a collection of categories of standards which we believe are necessary to bring that to life, the DPP system. And as you can see there, we have the usual suspects here, like unique identifiers, data carriers, data models and formats, for example. But also distribution exchange protocols. We need identity and access management. We need a set of core passport services which give you the basic services to issue a battery passport, for example. We need standards for processes. We need responsibility, rules, but like a whole security infrastructure around it. We need government system, and we need to have policy management systems and ways to enforce them in place. What we did then was following kind of a top-down approach in order to identify standards, starting on the global level, like ISO, IEC, going down to European level, CEN, CENELEC, ETSI standards. Of course, German project to German standards were in focus, DIN, DKI, but also standard setting organizations like IATF, W3C. But we were also looking into standards which are upcoming, like everything that Catena X is doing, Global Battery Alliance, or everything what's happening in the data spaces around Gaia X. We identified quite a lot of standards, and we need to dense that down. Could you? Thank you. And we set ourselves some evaluation criteria, 4 in total, to come up with standards which we think are suitable. And number 1 is cross-sector suitability. So yes, we work in a BatteryPass project, but the DPP system is actually cross-sectoral, so it will need to handle different kinds of DPPs. So that was one of our criteria. We wanted to look into open, non-proprietary, and independent of specific technical applications. We want to enable coexistence of standards. So if there are standards in use today, they should coexist, and we believe we shouldn't change what is already out there and in use. And of course, we need to take take all stakeholders into consideration and as requirements. For example, not only the economic operators, but also like market surveillance, customs, and so on. In order to identify existing mature international standards, but also new and innovative approaches, like something which is happening in all the data space area right now. I won't go much deeper into detail what kind of standards we identified. There will be a report coming out, as you heard earlier already, end of March, which gives you all the list of standards which we identified. But let's look now how a system like that could look like from a bird's eye view and independent of any technical implementations or technical standards. So what we know already, reading the ESPR and the battery regulation, we already have some building blocks identified which the regulation sets for us. So we know already there will be a EC user web portal which enables searching and comparing of information. There will be a registry which handles basically UIDs, commodity codes, for example, or as we heard earlier today already, like links to backups of DPP data. We heard about that there will be a way to access the data with elevated access rights for the authorities, for example, customs control or the market surveillance, which of course might need some reporting services. That wording actually is not there in the regulation, but we hear about electronic systems to support the reporting for the market surveillance in order to fulfill their tasks. So that's why we call it reporting services. On top, this is everything which we defined as EC central services. What we have as well below are the distributed DPP system service, so everything that is decentral, handled by either the economic operator or third-party service providers with their own distributed data repositories, as we called it. And another way of having third-party services are the backup services, which handles all the backups of the most recent version of the DPP data. But in our belief, we need way more. So we digged a little deeper into it, like what kind of other building blocks do we believe we need to have such a system running for the next decades. So one is, for example, the EC company service. We believe there needs to be some kind of way for economic operators to feed in their data, to register their DPPs, which will be millions in the future probably. And there needs to be some kind of API to do that automatically. We believe we need some data services like basic CRUD operations, so create, read, update, delete. We need verification, validation services. We need to have a way to issue DPPs. We need probably querying as well, or logging what's happening with the system. We believe we need some kind of operations portal with IT operation services, something like a service desk, for example, error handling and so on, in order to make sure this system can be maintained and kept up running. We need some policy management services to update policies, to enforce policies, for example. We believe we need some data modeling services. So something which handles all the different data models for different product categories, maintain them, update them, and publish that as well. And since it's a distributed system, of course, we need some way to access the distributed data from a central service. So we need some kind of routing or resolver services. Since we don't want to enforce every economic operator to use the same unified system, and we believe they could use whatever they're using now or plan to use in the future, like handling the data with NGS ILD, for example, or asset administration shells, or having something based on their own solutions. We need to have a way to translate this data with a translator service, so adapt methods, headers, payloads, paths, queries, and so on. And we think it would be beneficial to not only have the central access to the data, but also have means to have the way of economic operators to have their own portals where they have like direct B2C, B2B connections to the user of that data, to have the direct connection there. And of course, everything there needs some kind of APIs. And those APIs need to have some kind of identity and access control services, which are based on policies. Those was like a bird's eye view of what do we think we need, not going deep into specific technologies there. And we believe there are a lot of challenges which needs to be faced in the coming months in order to develop such a system. And number one is we need to look into different data carriers. We know batteries will have a QR code, for example. Other product categories might have different ones, data matrix codes, NFC, RFID, and so on. And we need to find a way to make them interoperable and really think about what do we want to store on that data. Like, will it be a link that we can scan with our phone and redirect it to the specific website with the DPP? Or do we need to store other data in there, which we need an app for that to interpret that data, and that needs to be developed. We believe we need to make the unique identifier principles interoperable. So what is used there in the market right now should work in the future, and we need to find ways to make that work in parallel and enable the coexistence of different principles there. We need to have routing services in place, like, as I just said earlier, central service going to distributed systems. We need to have some kind of routing systems. I guess we will see that later in the presentations from the CIRPASS project. I'm curious to hear about that. We need to make sure that different data management technologies can be used alongside each other. As I said earlier, NGSLD, asset administration cell, own solutions based on their own databases, for example, and so on. Although, mentioned several times today, DPP is not a track and trace solution, but the data needs to come from somewhere, and it needs to come from somewhere from the upstream supply chain. So we need to have ways for secure and reliable supply chain data acquisition and exchange, potentially based on auditing mechanisms to make sure this data is valid, which ends up in a BatteryPass. We need to make sure that different parties get access to the data depending on their specific access rights. So we need to have a seamless and secure provision of access to different stakeholder groups with sector-specific policies and rules. We believe we need to make sure that everything what's happening in the different data spaces building up right now needs to have cross-domain interoperability to make sure they work along each other. We need to make sure we have ways to really collect that data from the downstream, like, for example, dynamic data from the usage phase or the R phases, which isn't pretty much covered yet. And we should really think about how to align with different DPP initiatives around the globe right now, what's happening in Canada, Japan, Korea, America, and so on and on. That's like a short overview of what we're doing in the technical workstream there. As I said, we will have a report as well coming out end of March, and since it seems to be an important KPI, around 100 pages. Thank you very much. Yeah.